Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I hope this video finds you well wherever you are in the world. Continuing with my discussion of the Criterion Collection Laserdiscs, please, if you will let me, allow me to talk to you briefly about the title in the Criterion Collection Laserdisc catalog that is often cited as being spine number 11. This is the film from 1958, directed by Akira Kurosawa. The film is The Hidden Fortress. Before I continue with a discussion of the Hidden Fortress per se, let me just, if you will permit me, make one correction or correct the record with respect to one comment that I made in the video where I was discussing the Seventh Seal. So the last video in this series of Criterion Collection Laserdisc videos. Now, I referred to this as the first English or non-English language film to be released by the Criterion Collection catalog. I think that's how I worded it. I meant to say one of the first non-English language films. So please allow me to make that correction now. So this is one of the first non-English language films. And there is a little bit of interesting confusion that arises actually with respect to that particular point and vis-a-vis the spine numbering issue, which is something that I will also talk about later with The Hidden Fortress. But just to let you know, based on my understanding, in fact, we have this title, Lola Montez, with this particular Laserdisc made in 1986, according to the back here. This particular title, the Seventh Seal, is made in 1987, according to the back. So 1986 comes before 1987. So perhaps this is the first non-English language film to be released by the Criterion Collection Laserdisc crew. But this film, Lola Montez, comes after the Seventh Seal when it comes to the spine numbering catalog. As I mentioned, this is now known as spine number 10. This is now known as spine number 12. So I will talk about this issue in the video when I talk about Lola Montez, which is hopefully very soon. But so let me just correct the record by saying this is one of the first non-English language films that were being released by the Criterion Collection around this time. We also had films like Lola Montez, and we also have films later that we'll talk about later, films like this film, Black Orpheus, and I will talk about this in a separate video. But we also have the film, which I will be talking about now, which is the film called The Hidden Fortress, which is right here. And this is the film, as I say, directed by Akira Kurosawa. It is in Japanese with English subtitles as it appears on this particular presentation. And so that is a very interesting aspect to this. This is a very thrilling, enthralling, exciting, entertaining, electrifying, energetic film. And this to have this film in the Criterion Collection like this is a real great treat, of course. We will see this film later emerge in the Criterion Collection, of course, first as a DVD and then as a Blu-ray. And also there is another release of it in the special box set DVD set from the Criterion Collection. But in terms of general releases, we have these two releases, and of course the current release being this Blu-ray. And so when you're talking about this particular release, of course people will nowadays will of course gravitate to the current lineup. But when we think about this film and the release history and what was available in 1987, which is when this particular Laserdisc was being released, I think this is a pretty big deal. We're getting a Kurosawa film in the Laserdisc catalog. And up to now, we've had other great film artists, of course, like Orson Welles or Alfred Hitchcock or Ingmar Bergman, now Kurosawa. And we're getting a very memorable film from him in many ways, in many respects. And so this is a very big deal. So a wonderful film to have access to in 1987 in this particular format. This is The Hidden Fortress. Now let me talk about this particular Criterion Collection release that I have in front of me. Again, this, according to the back, it says first printing 1987, so I'm assuming therefore this was released in 1987, and this was released in this CAV videoscope or letterboxed format, and I'll talk about that in a second. And it's spread out over 3 discs or 5 sides, so therefore the 6th side is unused, so it doesn't have any data, but this is spread out over 3 discs. It's a long movie. According to the back, this is 139 minutes, and so it's a fairly long movie, of course, over 2 hours, so we're spreading it out over the course of 3 discs. So we have 3 discs in here. It's a pretty big set. It's a box, and I'll also get to that in a second. But before we do, let me just explain here that we have the presentation here with this banner logo up top that we saw in an earlier release, the 7th Seal, like so. And it's in this color here, this sort of creamy color with black font on top of that, and the creamy color is then carried over into the Hidden Fortress lettering on the top part of the cover, and then the bottom part of the cover is the picture itself, and it's this gray background here. And then if we look at the back, we have this, which is the background information, or I'm sorry, the back cover information. We have the Hidden Fortress up here. We have the essay by David Ehrenstein, which is indicated here like so. And then we have the information here about the special features, and then we have the cast and crew, and then the chapter breakdown, and then a little still here on the back. There is, at least as far as this particular release goes, only this particular still, and this kind of box format, and I'll show that in one moment. I should point out here also that the only special features are the fact that this is a CAV formatted release, and it's presented in what's known as videoscope, or kind of letterbox formatting. I should point out, though, that the particular print that's being relied upon, or the formatted, or the way that it's being presented in this particular Laserdisc, is such that, in actual fact, it's not a full presentation of the film as far as I am aware, and I'm using a comparison. When I compare it to, for instance, the later releases by the Criterion Collection, so this particular DVD release and then the later 2K digital restoration, it's very clear that this Laserdisc presentation, or the print that's being relied upon, or this presentation itself, is slightly cropped on the slides, not by much, but very slightly. For instance, if you have this actual Laserdisc, you can actually play it, and you can tell, because in the opening title card sequence, there are some title cards that have a full list of names from one side to the other, and as you know, in Japanese, names can be written vertically, so they're lined up like so, from one side to the other. The names at the very sides of the frame are cropped ever so slightly, maybe about 1/3 of the way in or so, not quite half. And so you have that little space on both sides cropped off on this film. And so you are getting a pretty full letterboxed format presentation of this film, but just know that it's not absolutely perfect, at least based on my knowledge of the film as based off of later releases. So is this perfect? No, but is it close? And considering the time, is it good? I would say yes. We have to remember this is released in 1987, and so these sorts of letterboxed formatting for home media presentations was, as far as my own personal experience, very rare, or maybe close to non-existent at the time. And so to have this sort of thing in this particular format, while not ideal when thinking about today's standards, is still very, very good for the time, I would say. And so this is, again, another kind of thing that Criterion is trying to do. Its best with, anyway, is trying to preserve the letterbox formatting and the aspect ratio to the extent possible. And so it's a valiant effort, and I think it's very good. And it's a sign of things to come, of course, where we will be, of course, now used to letterbox formatting and aspect ratios and the like with modern-day DVDs and Blu-rays. But here we still have the first steps, if you will, or the initial steps. We saw it in earlier releases like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Now let me show you the box format that we have here. So we've seen this box or lid format in other releases that I've shown in past videos like Citizen Kane or King Kong, but we have this here. So this is a box format, and we have the version I have is one where the side is attached here like so. So it doesn't lift off like a lid, but rather it opens like this. And so there's a bit of, it's sort of binding that's along the edge here. And so it opens like this opening lid, and then the discs are housed inside like so. And so this is an interesting little detail as far as this particular release that I have. I admit that I haven't necessarily researched this issue to the extent that I haven't tried to find all the various iterations and versions of this where possible. So I don't know if this exists in a sleeve format or if this exists with a lid that comes off. I don't know what other versions have been printed or made available. So if you have any information about this particular release, the earlier version of this, the 1987 printing of The Hidden Fortress, that is in a format that is other than this bound lid opening format of a box, please let me know, and I'd be very interested to hear any kind of information that you might have about that particular release that you have. But as far as the one that I have, this is what I have. And so The Hidden Fortress in this box set from the Criterion Collection Laserdisc catalog. And I should say also that this brings me to a very interesting issue with respect to this, and it has to do with the spine number. Now I have to apologize once again for the poor presentation, but here is the spine on its side, and you can see that it says Hidden Fortress here, and then the Criterion Collection along what is the bottom part of the spine. If we look, if I turn it vertically like this, you look here, there is no spine number in this particular box that I have. And just to give you the sense of the other side, there's no spine number on the other side either. I can't locate any number on any of the spines of this that I have. Now, I don't know all the various iterations of this particular release, if they do exist. So it is very possible that this could have been printed with a spine number on its side, and I just haven't seen it. So if you know of any information about this particular release with a spine number, I'd very much love to know about that. So please, the invitation is open for anyone who can help me with this particular issue. But my understanding is that, again, this is my own speculation, but around this time, 1986, 1987, as I was trying to indicate earlier, there were issues of titles made by the Criterion Collection Laserdisc team of films that didn't necessarily have spine numbers on them. And so this is one of them. I think it falls in the same timeline, so I can assume that this is probably in that same group. Again, I'm just, this is my real assumption only. But if that's the case, then what happens? As we saw with, for example, The Seventh Seal, and as we will see with other titles like Lola Montez and Black Orpheus, subsequent printings and subsequent releases of those same titles, whether they be actual CAV releases or CLV releases, depending on the title, subsequent releases of those titles had spine numbers affixed to them. And so, for example, what's an example? Like the film Lola Montez. We have this, which is the earlier 1986 printing of this disc, which didn't have a spine number. But then it was released later here, which is a CLV release. And this is from 1990, and it has the number 12A on it. The same was true for the film The Seventh Seal on this. It didn't have a spine number at the time, but then a subsequent CLV printing had it at 10A. So therefore, it was then accepted that this title was at spine number 10, and Lola Montez, the one I showed you just now, was at spine number 12. There's a similar situation that happens with the title Black Orpheus. Here is one of the Laserdiscs that we saw from the Criterion Collection. Here is a subsequent release of that, which is a couple years later, and this now has the number 13. And a similar thing happens with yet another release of Black Orpheus, this time with 13A. And so the point is that it seems like later, a year or so after these releases, there came subsequent pressings, subsequent printings of these particular titles that then had numbers assigned to them, 12, 13, etc. And so in that shuffle, I can therefore assume that the spine number 11, for whatever reason, wasn't given any specific assignment, let me put it that way. And as far as I can tell, this title, The Hidden Fortress, was never released around that time, in the same vicinity. In a CLV format that would be consistent with these other releases that we saw that would have given it a spine number 11. We will actually see this title much later on in the catalog because it will appear again, not under spine number 11, but under a completely different spine number, a couple of hundreds down the line. But for purposes of this particular time period, let me put it that way, this didn't necessarily get any subsequent release, as far as I'm aware, that would necessarily have given it a spine number 11. Once again, the information that I have is very patchy at best, so if you have any information about any pressing that you have that actually has the number 11 on it, please let me know, and that would be very helpful for my own information and study of these particular Laserdiscs. But I can only assume that perhaps without any further information, my best guess is that in the shuffle, this was given spine number 11 for purposes of arranging and organizing and explaining the catalog in terms of marketing and in terms of how we understand the Criterion Collection Laserdisc catalog today. And so this film therefore is deemed to be spine number 11. It's how it's described, I think, on LDDB.com. It's how it's described, I think, on the list which is available currently on, say, Wikipedia. And in very similar places like that. But just keep in mind that there is the possibility, or there is the issue, at least as far as I understand it, where it's not I'm not 100% sure why this is deemed to be spine number 11. There is no indication of this on this particular copy that I have. But without knowing anything further, and given the general understanding of this particular release in the context of Laserdiscs as we describe them today, I will describe it as being spine number 11, but with the caveat that I was explaining just now about this, again, based on my own very, very limited information on this particular release. So this, therefore, is described as being spine number 11. And this kind of spine numbering issue will come up again with other titles, so this won't be the first time that this, and this issue isn't really the most confusing issue. There are other issues in the Criterion Collection Laserdisc catalog that I'll try to get to. They're in fact more confusing, and so this isn't, it's a relatively minor issue, I think. And also, let me just say here too that for anyone who is unfamiliar with the Laserdiscs and who only knows the current Criterion Blu-ray DVD system of spine numbering, this kind of issue might seem a little bit disorganized or a little bit, I don't know, maybe unprofessional, or I'm not sure, but it might seem to be something that is far from the standards of Criterion that we expect and know today. And I should just say, as a kind of defense for anyone who might think that, is that we should also remember that these were the early days of Criterion Collection Laserdisc, and also the Criterion Collection period. And so, and home media was still a new thing, relatively speaking. And so, spine numbering and letterbox formatting and commentary tracks and special features were still very new things during this time, revolutionary things in the context of home media. And so I think it's understandable that it might have been the case that maybe Criterion didn't yet have a unifying set of rules or a system of spine numbering that could then lead it to have a consistent set of spine numbers down the track. I think we can assume that this was still early days and they're still trying to feel their way through the spine numbering wilderness, so to speak. And so I can certainly understand if there were some issues starting early as this that might come up. And as I say, as far as the understanding now, we understand this to be spine number 11. So I think that's okay for purposes of describing these. But just know that spine numbering issues do exist here, and so we will approach those, and I will try to talk about those as best as I can when they arrive. But here's one of them, just for your information, about the Hidden Fortress. So just to conclude about this film and this release, it's, again, a great release to see Kurosawa and the Criterion Collection come together in this home media format like we see it. And of course this is signs of things to come, because we will see other Kurosawa films emerge in the Criterion Collection, both in Laserdisc format and also later in Blu-rays and DVDs. So this is the start of a beautiful friendship. This is The Hidden Fortress from the Criterion Collection Laserdisc catalog. So thank you very much for your time, and please continue to take good care of yourselves and stay safe and be well, and continue to watch a lot of great movies. So until we meet again, my friends, thank you and cheers.